You're listening to On the Payroll, my podcast about consulting, project management, CRM platforms such as Salesforce and Microsoft CE, leadership, teamwork, and all the topics that related to that. It's basically an opportunity for me to speak to people that I really like about topics that fascinate us. In today's episode, I speak to Liz Lewis, who is a Salesforce director for customer success methodology. And we talk about her journey through the ecosystem and how she got to where she is today and the lessons that she's learned along the way. I really hope that you'll find it as enjoyable listening to it as it was for me in making it. Thanks a lot. Hello, Liz. Well, good
Hello.
morning to you.
Yes, good evening to you.
Thank you. Welcome to my podcast, which is called On the Payroll. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. It's my first podcast, so apologize if I'm a ball of nerves, but yeah, it's awesome.
Absolutely happy to have you. Now,
Thank you.
I connected with you because of some exchanges that we've had on LinkedIn, and your profile is really, really interesting. So, why don't we jump right into it? And I would like to hear the story of how you got to where you are today. And feel free to begin at any point, and let's just have the conversation flow.
Sure. So, like we talked about before, I fell into the Salesforce world. When I went to college, I had a political science and communications major. So I was planning to go to law school, decided at the last minute to take a break and from school for all those years and work. So just happened to get hired into product marketing. And from there made a move into the digital space for a grocery store chain in Cleveland. So they just happened to have used Exact Target because that's what their partner recommended. And that was my entrance into what was eventually Salesforce Marketing Cloud. Um, Started in the partner world a couple of years after that. Only got there because my sales rep at the time was begging me to meet with one of the partners who wanted to talk with me about a deal they had going on at my company, and just fell into chatting and was saying, we could really use someone like you doing implementations and some of our consulting work. So again, just fell into the consulting world, and then from there I've held a variety of roles. I started a campaign management practice for ongoing campaign services. So anyone listening who's not familiar with Marketing Cloud, that's the day-to-day email deployments, getting them set up, getting the audience ready to go, handling the deployment and reporting back to the client. So ongoing relationships, but took implementation work, training work, went on to run the solution consulting team there, and then moved into more of a practice COE type role at IBM. So that was a bit crazy. The scale all of a sudden went from small to as big as you could potentially get on the Salesforce side. And from there, really have been doing enterprise system design on the platform with cross-cloud initiatives, and found a position at Salesforce that matched exactly what I wanted to do. So focusing really on design thinking and changing experiences, it just resonated with me, and sent in my resume, and here we are. So
Thank you. Can you just give me one moment to deal with a little girl?
yeah, no problem.
What is it?
A lot of words.
I have, hang on just 1 second.
Oh yeah, no worries.
Sorry, I'm just going to pause. Thank you for that, Liz. It sounds like your career path has been a series of happy accidents, because I heard you use the word fell into quite a bit. And that kind of tells me that it's not a purposeful journey, as in that's what I want to do. This is how I'm going to get there. These are the steps I'm going to take. If I can take you right back to The first role you talked about, you were talking about retail. What was it about your particular experience then that kind of set you off on that path? You mentioned that you did a degree on political science. How
Mm-hmm.
did you get that first job? And was it where you thought you would start off with? Just walk me through what's going on at that
Mm-hmm.
time.
Yeah, so I had put in a resume to our school's career center, and I went to a school that's primarily engineering. So at the time they said, we may not have any jobs for you because you're in arts and sciences, and that's not typically our focus. And just happened to get a call from the company I ended up going to first, where they were looking for people who had good writing skills, who had a good balance of technical and that writing ability, because at that time really it was writing leaflets and catalogs and those pieces. And that was 2002, so before anyone was really getting into the digital space. So it was, in a sense, a happy accident. Looking back on it now, I am shocked that things that worked out so well, honestly, especially with the market today and how hard it is to have those things just happen now. And so I don't know that it would happen that way now for someone. So I don't want it to sound like, oh, go out and do this, because realistically it may not be possible. But yeah, they were just looking for people who could write well and could tell a technical story to a non-technical audience, and hired a few people just out of school to do that. So they think the biggest thing for me was just being open to trying it and to trying some of these positions, because I was not one of those people who knew what they wanted to be from the time they were small. I still don't necessarily know what I want to be when I grow up. Love what I'm doing, but it was never something you imagine, like, oh, I'm going to be working in technology consulting. So I was glad they took a chance on me, and I took a leap of faith going into that sort of role, not having any sort of marketing background.
That's fantastic. The thread I want to pull out actually. So, how you've described your first role is fantastic. So, what you took away from it was the ability to write well and to be able
Mm-hmm.
to tell a technical story to non-technical people. So, that was a piece of very valuable piece of skill that
Mm-hmm.
you acquired at that particular job. Can you do that for the subsequent places that you've landed in, and what you took from that then added up to the list of today that got to where you are now? So that, I think, is quite an interesting story.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of how I ended up where I am. Is A, I love technology, and B, being able to translate that and understand the different audiences you're speaking to, because sometimes you are speaking to a very technical audience, and we'll have that conversation. But being able to translate these topics into quick reads, easy to digest, and make people feel comfortable with what's going on. Because like I said, my next job from there was sending emails for a grocery store. So not necessarily explaining it to a technical audience, but because their digital marketing team was so new and digital marketing was so new at that point, being able to take that technology and evangelize it internally, to then branch out into social media and to then branch out into other email campaigns and really building the program. And that piece of being able to sell it without the sales piece is key. And that's key in consulting, and setting up your clients to have trust in you and faith that even if you're not explaining everything, that you have their best interests in mind and understand their needs and their goals, and can really explain why you're doing what you're doing and give them enough technical knowledge so that you can meet them at their level and they also understand why you're taking the path you are. So it's really finding that balance. And that's not unique on the Marketing Cloud side by any means. And across the Salesforce platform with consulting roles, it's really critical to be able to have that conversation and not just fall back on your technical knowledge.
Okay, so you make a really good point there. What I want to ask you now is about how you move from an end user environment to a consulting environment. How did that happen, and how did you feel at that time?
I was very, very nervous. Sorry to cut you off if you had something else. No. And I had tried to talk them out of hiring me at first because they were looking for someone who was really technical and really understood all the ins and outs of the technology. And I had been sending campaigns. I was self-taught. I knew how to do some things, but not necessarily in the best way. So they, again, were really looking for someone who could tell that story, but was also willing to learn the technology. And they were confident that I could learn the technology piece to the level that they desired, but also had that vision on the tech side, seeing where the industry was going, and really on my end wanting to branch out into some of those new trends and the new pieces of technology that were being launched. Because that, I think, is also key when we're talking career paths, is things change so quickly that you either want to learn it, which is great, or you don't, which is also fine. But knowing when to dig deeper was, I think, key for them hiring me, and knowing I wanted to dig deeper versus staying in the same type of role and becoming sort of an email deployment expert. But yeah, like you said, I was very, very nervous going in there, but thankfully, with all the certifications and learning paths that they had at the time, was able to quickly gain that technical confidence and then apply the storytelling piece and that evangelist role to the partner world there, and really extend what we were doing for our clients beyond what they had initially thought. So it was a good experience.
So what you're saying is they hired you for the attitude, basically, the mindset you had and the excitement you had for technology, as opposed to knowing about the platform and its capabilities. Was that what made you the most nervous?
Yes, I think that's what made me the most nervous. And moving into a billable role, there's nerves in that too, right? Knowing that you have to watch your hours and you have to bill all of your time, and will you meet your targets, having never been in a consulting role. And that to me was also a big shift. And I was worried that it wouldn't happen. Little did I know there was so much business that we would be billing over our targets consistently. But yeah, just that mindset for growth and for change. And in my case too, I'd say having a point of view on where some of these things are going, even if it's not 100% right or 100% thought out, being able to talk to people about where you see social media going and how you want to apply it, in my case. But again, sets you up as someone who wants to dig more into the technology, even if you haven't been a technical expert up until that point.
Was there anything about a shift to consulting that, apart from the timesheets and utilization levels, was there anything else that was a culture shock for you?
Going into client-facing work in general, I think, was a bit of a shock. And the first partner I was at, they were not a consulting firm in the way that you would think of Big Four consulting. and they were working for smaller clients, and it was very much one-to-one relationship in a limited capacity. So it wasn't quite the culture shock I would think you'd have potentially going into what we traditionally think of as consulting. I cannot understate how much I hate timesheets, so that's a big one. Yeah, but being responsible for a client's success and not being in that internal role where what you're really focusing on is a longer term, let's say, engagement from the consulting side, but internal. So you have the relationships, you can directly ask for budget, you have a bit more agency in how things go versus that client facing mindset where they have goals, sometimes goals you may not agree with, and you need to find a path to get them there without that other support that you would have if you were in an internal role. So that was a big shift for me. And yeah, it's honestly something that's still challenging. So that was part of why I pursued a non-billable role.
I see. So from there, you did move into the sort of like managing the practice. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really being that COE and focusing on thought leadership. And again, that internal evangelist is huge there, because when you're talking about a company at the scale of IBM, having to be able to tell that story at scale was critical, and tie it back to the technology and how that can really benefit clients. There was a lot more art of the possible there, and a lot more complexity on the technical side. That was really exciting. Incredibly cool projects, and really long-term client relationships. So coming in as a practice lead, you benefit from that trust that's already been established, and people are looking at you as an expert just because their close contact is bringing you to the table, which was something I really enjoyed about that type of non-billable role. There's also a bit of freedom and going into solution consulting with being able to paint the vision and not have to deliver it. So that's a bit exciting as well. But I always try to apply a delivery mindset to that, having been on the receiving end of some of those deals. So.
Absolutely. I think having been in delivery actually adds a huge amount of value when you go into the front loaded part of the engagement, as you say, the art of the possible, and trying to get the client excited about what the platform can do for them. It's quite exciting. But having been delivery, you know that you can't make promises that you can't keep, even though right. There's a tendency for that to happen. So that's really cool. Your answer actually sparked two questions that I can pick up. So one is, in your role as a director, is managing the P&L not part of that role, or?
Yeah, that's not part of that role, and I've honestly never gotten into the P&L side of things. Just because working for companies the size of IBM and Cognizant, you've got so many people already taking care of that piece. So that was experience I didn't have. And when I was interviewing for a number of different roles, as I was interviewing for my current role, that came up sometimes, is have you managed P&L? And it was coming up more and more at that director level. So anyone who can get experience doing that, I think, is really great experience to have. But you don't necessarily have to have it, as I've demonstrated.
Fair enough. So my second question was in terms of what was that shift? So you moved from end user to consulting. then to becoming a director. And you talked a lot about the things that excited you in that role, in that space. Was there anything that you didn't like or didn't enjoy as part of that role?
So I would say when I first moved into a director level role and being on the partner side of things, such a focus on sales targets. And I don't think this is particular to any one company. And like we were talking about with the solution consulting piece, such pressure to meet those targets that sometimes you're putting forth concepts or contracts that are not ideal, to put it mildly. And again, I don't think that's any of the companies I worked for. That happens everywhere. So that's one of the pieces that I was really looking forward to moving into more of an internal role, is not constantly having that numbers pressure on top of what you're trying to do, which is delivering quality work and helping clients grow their business. So that was always a struggle for me.
Have you ever encountered a situation that really tested your moral compass?
I'm lucky that I haven't, from a standpoint of clients we've worked with, and have been very grateful for the leadership I've had along the way, who have stood up and said, I can't ask anybody to take this work because of, moral compass. And if everybody declines, they didn't want to force people. So I'm very grateful for that. And I know that's not the experience of everyone. I would say the closest I've gotten is in that sales cycle, where you see how things are going and how it's really focused on getting the deal closed and not necessarily providing the client with the solution that they need. And sometimes that sales cycle is driven by the client, right? Like their budget is not matching what they want to do, or they don't have the resources to necessarily do it. So I don't want to stick it all on sales, but it's always uncomfortable for me, either on the sales side or delivery side, putting out what I don't think is my best work or what's going to really make the client successful.
How have you dealt with that in the past?
So I've tried to advocate for the client as much as possible by focusing on what's the best we can do with the constraints that we have. And ideally, if I know this isn't going to do it, providing clients either on the sales, in the sales cycle or the delivery side, that roadmap to get where they want to go, and setting expectations as much as you can try to set expectations with clients, because they don't always hear it, that we're limited here in what we can do. We'll make you as successful as we can to this point with these limitations. And here's a way you can get to where you really want to. And as long as the expectations are set, I don't think it's so much a moral compass concern for me. But you don't always have teams that support that sort of talk track.
Yes, I can identify with that.
Right, not unique to any of my companies, just sales and consulting in general.
Yes, I think those problems are endemic to many consulting businesses, where the driver is, as you say, utilization, billable hours, etc. Have you, in your journey, come across any situations where it's been challenging for you as a woman in technology?
Yes, I would say just the situation of being a woman in technology in general is a bit of a challenge. In some places like IBM, I will say I didn't feel it was that much of a challenge as it has been potentially at other places. I think just because the people hired are so technical across roles that you get a bit of credibility just having been hired, period. So that I'm, again, really grateful for. But beyond that, I would say it depends on your teams. It's not necessarily a company-wide way of thinking, but for sure have experienced that sort of, I don't want to say treatment because that's not the right word, but have seen that lens coming from people that, oh, you're not as technical because you're a woman. And sometimes it's discussed as, oh, where you're more consultative, which means you're not technical. And I think that shortchanges a lot of women in technology. But there's also plenty of great teams out there who don't feel that way. So certainly not the complete experience.
Thank you for that. That segues very nicely into what I'd like you to share in terms of your current role as a director of Success 360 methodology at Salesforce, and how that's come about from your role at Blue Wolf, and what do you currently do in this role?
So currently focused on, at a really high level, improving the customer success experience for all Salesforce customers. So this is the first role I've had since early in my career where I haven't been focused on the technology piece, and there's teams focused on that piece. And I'm constantly saying, please let me know if I'm stepping on your toes because I'm giving you all of my technical opinions. But yeah, it's been a great team. They've been really welcoming. Everybody's really supportive of different opinions and different perspectives. And it's a very diverse team, which I think is great because you do get a lot of different perspectives and get really that full picture, which we want, of different types of customers and what success means to them. And so very much focusing on those consultative skills versus the technical piece, which also made me a bit nervous, but it's been working out well so far.
So I've done podcasts with a director of customer success, and what I'm trying to find out is, because the titles are different, I'm trying to understand the nuance between the different roles. So maybe, how about if you kind of talk through at a high level the things you do on a daily and a weekly basis, and who do you have calls with, what problems are you solving? That'd be allow me to paint a picture of what you do.
Yeah, so I will say, being 4 weeks into my job at Salesforce, the different titles are, yes, I look at the org chart and going through, and it's certainly not as clear as it could be. So I feel that. So in terms of a director of customer success, there's the side that's really focused on the success managers and the team that's directly interacting with the customers. From what I'm doing and where I'm focusing is the strategic side on how we improve, again, that overall experience. So in relation to a role that's a director of customer success, we're setting the tone and then they're applying it to customers. So it's nice and really interesting working for a company that's large enough to have dedicated strategic roles, because you don't get that everywhere. And focusing on that one piece of it versus consulting where you're all over the place all the time is, I think, key to understanding what some of those roles are versus the customer success, customer facing ones where they're working with the client and adjusting depending on all of their needs, if that makes sense.
It does. Basically, from what I'm gathering is that you set the approach, and so more strategic than tactical. Would that be accurate to say?
Yes, more strategic than tactical. I'd say tactical in that part of setting the tone is setting requirements and user stories and things you get into in consulting, right? As part of your initiative and rolling out the strategy. But yeah, beyond there, then we're handing it to the tactical teams who implement different parts of these programs.
Do you interface directly with clients, or is it purely internal?
People on my team have. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but that's part of the plan, is to connect with clients and get their feedback. And I'm lucky that I have a number of clients who I know have feedback in this area that I can talk to. So I expect I'll be talking to some of them or some other clients as I move forward in the role.
So talk to me about the different people or leaders or managers that you've worked with and for during your career, the lessons that you've taken with you to where you are today. What are the, let's say, top 3 things that you've learned and you've taken to heart in your career journey?
Sure. I've worked with, on the consulting side and starting out in my career primarily with the marketing team and working with marketing managers or VPs of marketing, or in some cases the CMO, and then end users on that when you get into the consulting world. So those are typically my main points of contact, but getting into more of the big consulting world, IT a lot of times was the entry point, because that's where they have the relationships, being technical companies. So that was a big shift. And one of those top 3 things I've learned that I've told some of the newer hires or people in intern programs is our jobs in some cases are more therapy than they are technical implementation, because you're getting people to talk to each other who normally don't have the best interactions. So understanding where IT is coming from, understanding where marketing is coming from, and bringing that piece together has been key for me. Because usually the more complicated they get, the more likely there is a chance that they're not talking to somebody, and that's driving part of the program. So for example, I've had clients where they've been trying to do all sorts of crazy audience segmentation in Marketing Cloud, and they give you a list of 20 different criteria. And that typically for me was a signal, okay, they're not talking to the data people or the IT people, because they could 100% pull this for them. So who else do we need to bring to the table and work through some of these access issues and these relationship issues? Legal is one that I've worked with quite a bit, especially on the marketing side when you're getting into consent and GDPR and all the various regulations. On the therapy piece of it, no one wants to talk to legal, and especially you do not want to get an email from legal saying they need to talk to you. And so keeping that lens on, in addition to having people talk to each other, knowing which stakeholders you need to bring in, and that your immediate customer may not be thinking about that. So identifying who those people are and then bringing them to the table when your client might not be. Third, I would say more and more I was working with CRM administrators and CRM users. And as a whole, Marketing Cloud people and Salesforce core people speak a different language. I don't think this is a secret to anybody, because it's a totally different approach, and the implementation on the CRM side is very development focused. For Marketing Cloud, it's more plug and play, and you're talking to marketing people. So being able to understand enough about the cross-cloud experience and the 2 different clouds to have those conversations and bring all of those sides together. That's, I would say, the most technical part that I experienced, and especially in recent years. understanding that technology enough on both sides to say, okay, you can do this here. I can't tell you how. Your CRM administrator surely knows how to do it. So let's talk to them about what you're trying to accomplish. Or talking to the CRM admin saying, yeah, this is possible in Marketing Cloud, but we need XYZ from you to make that happen. And here's at a high level how it then works once it gets over on the Marketing Cloud side. So again, that's my experience as a Marketing Cloud technologist. I don't think it's that different anymore from the larger Salesforce ecosystem, but yeah, those would be, I would say, the top 3 learnings and the top 3 people.
So let me take you to item 2, where you were talking about legal. So what are your thoughts there? Is it to include them? What's the best way to manage that relationship with legal in order to make sure that you're not exposed in the long run? I think traditionally, as you pointed out, the relationship has been tinged with fear, basically.
Right.
You said,
right.
But it is necessary because we're talking about risk and exposure and things like that. How would you advise clients to just think about that and manage that from the get-go?
It's one of the first things I talk about in discovery, whether it's on the sales side or the delivery side, is that list of stakeholders, legal being one of them, and having that conversation up front. They'll need to be involved. When do we involve them? If it's a larger company, they have people focused on just the consent piece, just the data privacy piece. So getting some direction from the client as to where they think they should be involved. And then just from experience, either saying, yeah, that seems appropriate, or challenging back, saying that's too late. And it could derail the whole project by not involving them. So it's a balancing act for sure. And they have lots of things going on, so they don't want to be involved in the whole things. But identifying those critical junctures where you have to get at least their buy-in, if not sign off, when it comes to data, when it comes to any sort of consent piece, when it comes to any sort of unique security concerns or, regulations, depending on what industry a client's in. So financial service and healthcare, life sciences, there's a number of concerns that they have that others don't that involve legal. That's how I've handled it. And I have those stories of, hey, by the way, no one talked to legal and the project is now dead in the water until we get this fixed. So sharing some of those is usually a good motivator for other projects.
Absolutely. I think it's a lot of it is cautionary tales of what not to do.
Right.
Right. Sorry, I'm just going to jump back to I know the role at Salesforce is quite new for you, which actually means that the whole recruitment process is fresh as well. So I have been asked, which I don't know the answer, I know roughly, but it'd be great from your point of view to talk through the process about how you first got to know there was an opening, there was a role there, and the whole recruitment process, the interviews you've had, how you felt along the way, and just paint a picture for us on how you got there.
Yeah, so I found the job posting on LinkedIn first. So I have a number of job searches that were really helpful, because my last move, I was really looking for that right role, not necessarily just to leave a company. So setting up searches that are returning the right results, I think, was critical for me. And I was able, through my network, to be referred in, which I've heard more and more, that's your best chance coming from outside Salesforce of getting considered for any role, is if you have someone that you can list as a referral. So that I would say for someone looking to go to Salesforce would be something I'd really, really pursue, and look at your network and just ask people, because people are more than willing to help if you ask them, I found. From the recruitment to hiring process, it's pretty similar to what I've experienced elsewhere, with a couple rounds of interviews with different people who are, in your role or related to your role. So there wasn't anything atypical there. I thought Salesforce did a nice job of not having an overly complex process. Like everyone can look up or has heard about Amazon's process and all the steps you have to go through and take to interview there, or the Google way and how they interview. But I thought Salesforce was pretty straightforward and respectful of everyone's time. And my recruiter was great, my primary point of contact, because she provided me with insight as to what each step would be. I could always call her up and talk about how to prepare, or get her feedback on where to focus. She was always quick with returning any feedback she got. So I would say the process was fairly painless, honestly, just because of how smoothly it went. And again, how respectful they were of time. So there was no full day round of interviews like you may have elsewhere. And then from there, onboarding picks up, which is great. And they have the whole program that gets you set up with your computers and all of those pieces you need to get started on your first day. So I had a really positive experience, especially when you consider the typical tech experience for interviewing.
Absolutely. So you're 4 weeks in. Mm-hmm. Anything that confirmed to you how great it is, or any surprises? Oh my goodness, I didn't realize they did this here. Anything of those kinds that you're able to share?
So from the consulting side, there were always those things we suspected, like, what is Salesforce doing on this? Like, how are they routing this, or how did this end up coming to us? So it was funny being then on the inside saying, oh, now I understand why that happened. So yeah, that part was funny. Yeah, I found it to be, I would say, even better than I expected, because I've been in the ecosystem for a long time. And to me, Salesforce was always a leader in caring about the larger community and doing good, not just making a profit. And I found that to be very true from inside the company, that they live what they preach. So especially with COVID, and one of the things I was looking for was a company with as good of a work-life balance as you can have right now, and supportive of people's needs outside the company. And I found that with Salesforce. So that piece lived up to my expectations, if not exceeded them. Yeah, in terms of overall company and structure, I don't think there were any particularly scary moments or anything. It's a lot of the same big company stuff that you have at big companies that have had a lot of acquisitions, and you're trying to work through all these different perspectives and different teams. So pretty standard if you've been in in that world, right?
Fair enough. Thank you. I want to be respectful of your time, but just to kind of close out, I would like to know a little bit about what your personal values are and how they align to where you currently work. So you've already mentioned work-life balance. So what else, what other values are key for you? And you also talked earlier on about making sure that your next role was the right one, and how you, well, obviously being in Salesforce ecosystem, going to the mothership seemed to be the ultimate goal for many people. But what are the values that align for you that just made you think this was the right choice?
Transparency and trust, because those two go together, is a big one for me. It's the approach that I've always tried to take with my clients. And I was never that person who only told clients what they wanted to hear, which can go a variety of different ways. So I know how tough it is. But I found Salesforce to be very transparent as they can be with employees and with customers, and really focusing on developing trust, which, especially I think in this environment with everything going on and people's stress levels, is critical. Being able to trust that you're in good hands and that people will tell you the truth. That's big for me. Like I said, work-life balance is big, and also giving back is huge for me, because I recognize how lucky I've been and have always tried to give back where I can. So the fact that Salesforce encourages that and then has volunteer time off so you can go and give back to the community, and we've done team efforts of volunteering, and there's even a volunteering exercise as part of your onboarding where you all do some volunteer work together. That's very much in line with my values. And again, with the state of the world, the fact that Salesforce steps out and takes positions on things versus the typical corporate speak was really attractive to me. And it's part of why I've stayed in the ecosystem in general as long as I have, is that tends to cascade to partners and to customers.
Yes, I see a lot of it in the Ohana, and all the things that's being done within the community and the Trailblazers, and also the things that the CEO does has been very inspiring. So I just want to thank you, Liz, for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you.
Especially about the journey that you've gone through. I think it's really, really fascinating on how you go to where you are and the journey you've taken, lessons you've taken along the way, that I think a lot of my listeners and audience will be able to take away and learn something from. Thank you so much. I really appreciate
I'm glad. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.